Late last night, upon the completion of the Empyrean Foundation restoration, aka Fractaline Stonks, Trials of Osiris was announced and confirmed to be returning to Destiny 2 on March 13th. And of course, as you can guess, this is going to be the focal point of the new season, Season 10, which is called Season of the Worthy. There was a developer insights vlog that was released as the announcements for Trials, basically talking about what it's going to be including, and some, again, of course, developer insights. And some developers even took to Twitter, like Luke Smith, to provide additional information and confirmation about certain things that people were wondering about concerning Trials. Now, although there's a ton of excitement for Trials, and I myself am very tremendously excited to finally have a true endgame PvP based activity again, I want to try and talk as critically as I could about my opinions and feelings towards the announced things that we know pertaining to Trials, and again, just my initial thoughts and impressions on everything that's been announced. Remember, we haven't played this yet, we haven't experienced this yet, so this is just impressions and thoughts based on some small tidbits of information that has been revealed. I want to start with the fact that Trials of Osiris is indeed going to be connection and card-based matchmaking, which I think for the overwhelming majority is very welcome. I do like this quite a bit. I like that it's prioritizing connection, and I like that it's just card-based matchmaking, kind of like that heavy air quotes tournament style matchmaking, where when you get a win, you're progressing to other people that have a win, and when you're later on in the card and you're about to go flawless, well, you're going to face someone else that's really playing with the same stakes on the line. I think that's cool. I'm also glad that it's not just a flat-out SBMM system where you're going to be matching people of your skill level, and it's prioritizing connection in that process. I do wonder, though, when you get to the later wins, if it's going to forego maybe the exact same win level and find people at least around the same place as the card, based on, again, what's available and the connection quality. I hope it does that personally. I just don't want to be in a place where I'm on a high level of wins and maybe it's late at night and not many people are on, and it can't really find a similar match for people that are on the same level of wins that have a good connection, but then it might throw me into a game with a bad connection. I just don't want to play games with a not prime connection, and that's what's important to me. Let's talk about maps now. So 3 fan favorite iconic Destiny 1 maps are returning with the release of Trials of Osiris. We have the Anomaly, we have the Cauldron, and Exodus Blue. So of course I'm excited and interested to see how these maps play in Destiny 2, but that doesn't mean there's not concerns that I have for these maps that have carried over from my experience with them in Destiny 1, and concerns about how they might exactly play in Destiny 2 with the different movement and sandbox. The first concern really, I think, pertains to all of the maps, probably the least to Exodus Blue perhaps. Not sure, maybe Cauldron won't be so bad either, but I want to talk about the spacing of these maps and how they will play in Destiny 2. Twilight Gap was a map that was really enjoyed and liked quite a bit in Destiny 1. However, I really don't enjoy it in Destiny 2. It just feels very, very small. It feels like shotguns are incredibly dominant on the map, which again wasn't not the case particularly in Destiny 1, but at the same time, it just feels like there's a squish effect. Like, the movement abilities in Destiny 2 feel like I can get around the map and close gaps so insanely quickly on these maps, and that's where obviously I think it becomes a little bit more advantageous for shotguns, despite having a few nice sniper angles, of course. Basically, I can't quite put my finger on it, but on Twilight Gap, the map feels incredibly small given the movement abilities that we have. It just doesn't feel proportionate. It doesn't feel like it plays well. And I'm concerned that the Anomaly, Cauldron, or Exodus Blue might suffer this same fate. We have things in Destiny 2 like Stompies as a massive example, and Dune Marchers, sprint speed increases, things that can make you fly through the air. We have the Top Tree Dawnblade ability now with Icarus attached. We have so many crazy movement abilities that can allow you to close gaps and get to places very, very quickly, which kind of makes the maps feel smaller by comparison. It's not that those things are a problem, but when older, smaller maps are introduced, it makes them feel very small, and in my opinion, not proportionate to what we have available in Destiny 2. In the trailer, I noticed that on the map Anomaly, the floor seemed to be raised and be completely flush or flat, which is actually a really welcome change for me. I think that multi-level kind of pit made it really awkward and janky when you're trying to engage in fights, trying to take different creative angles, and play the multi-level design on the map, which is one of its massive strengths. So I really love this change if this is an official thing. I believe that people are going to be able to play the multi-level much more confidently despite the ball in the middle, which allows people to still use that ball and that rotator as cover and make creative plays with it. However, you can still take different angles far easier, which again plays to the strengths, I think, of Anomaly, that whole inner area offering so many different angles and multi-level design. I think this is really just going to double down on that, which I really love. When I think of the Cauldron, I think of one of my favorite maps in existence, but I also think of a map that I think could have been so much more, and that's for one reason, one thing: the doors. I think Cauldron is an amazing asymmetrical map with different areas on the map. It honestly makes me somewhat reminisce of some of my Halo favorites like Guardian. However, the center area, which is of course a focal point and control point, is blocked off by doors on each end of its entrances, and these doors are, in my opinion, incredibly problematic. The first and maybe most annoying and obvious thing about these doors that people will probably remember is the latency with them. There's going to be delay and latency over the network with how long these doors take to open, when they close, shots getting through them or making it look like you're getting shot through a wall. There's just so many problems with these doors in terms of latency that makes it a really frustrating experience. Now, aside from the lag and latency that could be incredibly frustrating at times, I think the doors are just limiting the map's potential overall. I think you have the center area that you want to control, but at the same time is completely secluded from the entire outer area of the map. And for me, that's a problem because if the doors weren't there, you'd be able to take a lot more different angles. Flanks would be more viable and more encouraged and wouldn't be given away quite as freely simply because you gotta open the door to flank. Unfortunately, these doors also limit the opposing team from being able to contest the players in middle, unless of course you had to have one of your players sit by the door to try and contest, or try and go for a snipe or a team shot, which again just feels so janky and unnecessary for me, because I think it would be so much better that if I could have a player in maybe the outside areas like the red room or maybe the bridge where heavy ammo used to spawn, and try and take angles together and collapse. But of course, again, when you go to take a flank, firstly, the Destiny radar is pretty forgiving, so it kind of gives you away. Secondly, the speed of your flank is also toned down or limited because you have to wait for the doors to open. And then thirdly, between the doors and the radar, you're probably given away at this point, and I very, very much dislike that. I think that you'd be able to take so many more angles and collapse so much more as a team and encourage kind of spreading around the map and just swarming that middle area and then continuing to apply pressure on each of the spawns. I think that it would offer, again, just so much more in regards to that if the doors were not present. Now, I don't know if the doors are going to be present or not. I'm just going based off of the original Destiny 1 design. However, there was a point when they were doing the fly-through of the maps that I did see this little top notch of the door. I don't know if that's just there for style or what, but I feel like that was there in Destiny 1 when the doors were open, and again, they would close. I don't know if that's style or not. I'm really not sure if the doors are coming back or not, but I really, really hope they are not coming back. Exodus Blue honestly is the least of my worries, and I'm the most excited for how this is going to play. I think this map has a lot of really different ranges, long range engagements, pretty close range engagements, so I'm pretty excited to play this. Moving on to our next topic of discussion, power level is enabled in Trials, and I gotta say, I really dislike this. I dislike any point where power level is enabled in PvP. I think it makes Iron Banner very unfun for myself, who is more of a hardcore PvP player. I do love playing PvE, I do the raids, I like leveling, I enjoy it, but let's take for example this past season, I haven't really been able to do that. I haven't, for the first time in a long time, been able to get to that level cap and infuse a lot of my gear, and that's really deterred me from playing Iron Banner. And as a hardcore PvP player currently in the state of the game, the Iron Banner is a great place to get really good rewards, really good armor, your enhanced mods, and some really good weapons. So I want to play it as my endgame PvP for the moment, but I'm also really at a disadvantage that makes it incredibly unfun. I feel like power level is actually just more so catering to those that are just grinding PvE than they are spending a lot of time playing PvP. Now, unless there was a way to tangibly level and get pinnacle rewards from PvP that is not trials or not a power level associated activity, then perhaps it wouldn't be so bad, because I can just play PvP, get to my max level or whatever, close to that at least, or competitive level, and then I can go play Iron Banner or Trials and not have too much of a worry. Again, I just feel like power level is catering to the folks that are playing PvE more than they're actually playing PvP. And for a PvP based endgame activity, that really disappoints me. I'm not entirely certain if the power level on the artifact affects this power difference. I should really hope not in any way, but that puts even more of a disadvantage on someone like me who is a hardcore PvP player. And again, I probably would just end up not playing a lot of the time because of that. I don't have to just sit and do mundane activities like repeatedly complete bounties just so that another player doesn't have a ridiculous advantage over me. On the other hand, power level being enabled is a great entry gate to make sure that there's a certain degree of competency for players that they've invested into the game, and on top of it keeps out cheaters so they can't just mod or aimbot or whatever and then get banned and make a new account and hop right in. That will filter that a little bit, so I think that's good. I 100% know and acknowledge that in the past, I'm someone who said that if you're going to play Destiny, it means playing all of Destiny. It means PvP, it means PvE, it means all of it. You can enjoy what you enjoy most, but playing the game includes all of it. And in scenarios like when PvE players had to go to the competitive or glory playlist and get the mountaintop or recluse, I said, well, that's part of the game. There's many times where as a PvP player primarily, I have to go do PvE activities to get some of the greatest weapons for PvP. That's just how the game goes. I do think that is applicable to power level advantages. So sure, I get it. I have to go raid, I have to increase my power level, I gotta infuse some of my weapons to get to the point where I can be competitive in Trials of Osiris. I'm less upset about that, but more upset about just advantages over other players at that point in Trials. I would rather have just a baseline level to enter that serves as an entry gate for all the right and great reasons it does, and then after that, it doesn't really matter. That's just kind of your entry into the playlist. I very much dislike the fluctuation, if you will, of having advantages over different players. To quickly touch on loot and rewards, we can see that the iconic Trials Egyptian style armor is returning with an aura or glow effect that takes place and happens after going flawless each week, which is pretty cool. I like that they're kind of allowing you to show that, hey, you know, I went flawless, and you get to flex that a little bit. The weapons do appear to look new, although there was a few that seem to have somewhat similar models. There was like a Doctrine of Passing looking weapon that was kind of interesting. And of course, there was also an Outbreak Prime Trials of Osiris themed ornament that we could see. My biggest concerns for Trials right now is simply that we just don't know how the reward structure is going to work. We don't know what these weapons or armor are like. We don't know what they provide in terms of perks or abilities. We don't know, again, how we're going to obtain them. I assume it's going to be somewhat similar to that of Destiny 1, of course, but we still don't know what these structures are. And of course, not knowing that, it does make me a bit concerned, not in a bad way, just I want to know more about how it's going to work before I think of any opinions on them. Lastly, there was a director's cut released today that talked about weapon infusion. Of course, it talked about a lot of the goals in Destiny, but weapon infusion was a hot topic, I thought, that really pertains to Trials in many ways. They talked about that they don't want to have all legendary weapons coming forward and being able to be used in those endgame power level affected activities, so that there's more space for new weapons to kind of be desirable in their place. You know, you want to chase those new weapons, you want to use them in the endgame activities, and they have a place where they're going to be relevant. So some weapons, they're only starting with legendaries, not exotics, and I hope it never gets to the point of exotics, but I think that with legendaries at the least, they seem to want to have a life cycle of them before something new comes out, and they might be retired for those endgame power level affected activities. Trials, of course, being one of those. Honestly, I gotta say, I'm not really a fan of this. I understand why and the idea behind this. Of course, power creep is a problem in Destiny. How do you just keep making weapons that are desirable and people want to chase and play the new modes where you get them from without just being outright better? We've seen so much power creep in the last little while in this game, and it's just getting to a point where I don't even know how much farther they can take it. What do you do to make these better without just kind of destroying the state of the game? So yeah, I'm super empathetic and I understand the idea behind this. That being said, I'm still not a fan of it, personally at least. It was compared to Magic: The Gathering, which is a card game that does have a competitive format, a few different formats, and one of the things with Magic, to my understanding, I don't play it, but to my understanding, is that they have a rotation of cards that are kind of like allowed to be played in the modern format. You can see the similarities and their comparison quite clearly. Destiny 2's modern competitive format would be the equivalent of the power level enabled activities like Iron Banner and Trials of Osiris. But to me, I think of Destiny more so like another card game that I actually happen to play competitively. I make a lot of comparisons to it quite a bit, which is Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! In that game, they allow you to use the massive entirety of the whole sandbox of cards from the start of the game's existence. And that obviously allows players to have a lot of tools at their availability and some pretty awesome moments of ingenuity when deck building. I feel Destiny is similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! In that way, since I can go to different places, get my different weapons from those locations, and build my deck, which is my loadout, using everything, the entirety of Destiny that I have at my disposal. For those of you that are familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh!, you know that the competitive format does have a ban list though, some cards that are just simply not allowed, or quantities of them that are not allowed. This is obviously done to ensure the best balance possible for the competitive metagame. And while you can compare that to not letting certain weapons get infused to be used in those endgame power level activities, sure, in my opinion, I feel the equivalent of ban lists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is sandbox changes and updates and tweaks in Destiny. In a card game, you cannot just change the text of a card once they're in people's possessions. Yes, it's happened very few times over history in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's called an errata, I believe. But again, it's very rare and not a good solution overall, as players need to get a new copy of that card with the updated text. Destiny as a video game does not suffer that problem. Yes, every 3 to 4 months, developers can go in and just make changes to the behavior of weapons. So to me, that is what should be balancing, in my opinion, the game, and not so much limiting the sandbox and just tools we have at our discretion to build our decks or our loadouts. I understand this doesn't really solve the whole power creep issue, and I get that. But to me, just having weapons, maybe even some that might feel redundant, just available from different activities, maybe more easily available, maybe just available from a different place that you would prefer to play. So, for example, if I could get a weapon like Spare Rations from doing PvP, I'm sure PvP players would really like that, and vice versa for a PvE weapon for a PvE player. To me, I think that is good enough. And Destiny becoming a game where you can just know where to get different weapons from different activities and just use that as your toolkit to go obtain them and create your deck is satisfying enough to me. Is it satisfying enough to make the game sustainable and sell DLCs and whatnot? I don't know, but that's just my thoughts and my opinion. For those that might be concerned going into Trials about what weapons will be relevant in this whole infusion fiasco, I did see Recluse, Revoker, Spare Rations, Randy's Throwing Knife, Blast Furnace, Breakneck, Last Hope, and a lot of other weapons used. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of limitations now. And they mentioned in the developer's cut something like a 9 to 15 month life cycle for weapons. So I honestly think we're good for quite a while. This is like really long down the line potentially. So those are my thoughts on Trials. I'm pretty cautiously excited and hyped for it. Again, I can't lie. I am pretty excited for it and to finally have a true endgame PvP activity. However, again, I want to try and be as level-headed as possible, be as critical as possible, within all fairness, of course. So I hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts on the matter. Trials is exciting, and I'll see you guys later. Take care.